Aloha! Welcome to Marriage on the Spot. We're your co-hosts, Kent and Elizabeth Kitagawa, and we just celebrated a very important, very significant holiday, Easter. And as leading up to that, there's been a lot of, there's been a lot of church sermons and messages that talked about, especially the Last Supper, and we got to hear a really very great sermon from a pastor talking about the significance of that Last Supper and how that the communion that we celebrate came out of that, speaking about that final cup, the cup that Jesus took, and when he instituted, communion, and he said, this was the cup of grace. This was the cup where he gave himself. He was speaking about giving himself as a redemption, that I will redeem you. There were the 4 cups in the Passover meal, the Seder, and he took the 3rd cup, and this is the one where he said, take this cup and drink it, all of you. Do this in remembrance of me, right? And that cup was a cup of redemption, where God spoke these words to the Israelites before they left out of Egypt. And he said, I will redeem you. And he did, this was looking forward to his Jesus redemption for not only, of course, the Jews, the children of Israel, but also for all of us who would become his children. And that was powerful. That was a powerful message. And that his broken body was signified by the bread that he gave.
Yeah, he was even sharing, the unleavened bread, how you can see the stripes, the lines, and the holes.
The holes, right?
The bukas.
Right.
All the holes and all the stripes. By those stripes, now we can say by the stripes we are healed.
Right.
And the pukas from the bone, for the nails, screws and nails in his body. Significant, very significant.
Yeah. See, but I think the powerful thing was, I think for, at least for us, as we looking at marriage, and how does this relate to our marriage relationship, and Jesus, called himself a bridegroom. He is the bridegroom, and he gave himself up for his bride, to redeem his bride, which is the church. Right. And in Ephesians 5:20 to 5:21 to 33, that whole section of where Paul is writing about the marriage relationship and what the significance of it, and the commands, the calling that God puts on us as a couple. You know, our roles, husband and wife, where he says in 21, he says, we are to submit to one another out of reverence to Christ, because of him, because of who he is, because of what he's done for us.
And he showed it as an experience, how he submitted to God.
Right. He submitted to God.
He
right.
was the example.
Yeah.
He was the example. He submitted to his Father.
Right. And he also submitted himself for us.
Yes.
See, and that's the thing, you know. And this is where, you know, this whole sometimes gets a little bit screwed up in the, you know, in our, you know, as in the church and in traditions and things like this, where people don't really look at that whole part. They don't look at the whole message there, but they try to cherry pick, you know, what is you know, seems good to them, you know, or seems beneficial for their position, you know. This is why a lot of times you hear guys say, well, it says here, you know, wives, you got to submit to your husbands, you know, as unto, you know, as unto the Lord, you know, and so you got to listen to me, you know, blah blah blah. We've talked to a lot of couples with that kind of, you know, that kind of distorted view. But the whole thing is not true, because the very next section of that whole passage is.
And what would I say? Submit one to another.
Right, right. I mean, that's the truth. Is we need to because the very next one is, but husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church, giving himself up for her. So he submitted himself to us, basically for us. To redeem us. And we talked about, you know, in Easter or Good Friday, you know, where, you know, how the brutality and the Lord took on, you know, the not only crucifixion, which would have been horrendous enough, but first he was flogged, which is, you know, he was basically torn apart alive by a cat of nine tails, a lashing, you know, which was, we don't even know how many lashes he got before that, but we do know that he was bleeding out and his back was torn up so much that, you know, it describes him as a worm and not a man anymore. He was no longer recognizable as a human being, you know. And so when we talk about, okay, we are to love our wives as Christ loved the church, husbands, this is the picture, you know. This is the picture. This is the calling that is placed upon us, to die to self, to give ourselves, giving ourselves up for our wives, so that we can present them, you know, through the washing of water by the word. In other words, God gives us this word of truth, but it is also a word full of grace, full of purity, pure love. Right, you know, and we wash and purify through the way that we speak, through the way, you know, we talk, you know, the things that we say to one another. Is there love? You know, is there the love of Christ in our communications with our wives? You know, so that we can present our wives to us as a spouse. Looking at our wives, See, this is what the revelation of Christ, his love for us, presenting our wives to ourselves. We have to look at our wives as a radiant bride without spot or blemish.
Yeah, that is usually not part of the wedding ceremony to share that part.
No.
You know, but grace is really unmerited favor.
Right.
And that goes both ways.
Yes.
And I just thank God. I thank God for you. But I thank God, first of all, for him, who made it possible that we got together.
That's right.
And that we can follow his footsteps together. And that you love me so much. Yeah. And I love you.
But that's it. You know, this is the gift. We must see each other through those lens, through that lens, through the love of Christ, through the grace of God.
Yes, the open grace, unmerited favor.
Right.
Whether we deserve it or not.
That's right.
He gave us his grace.
Yeah. Because, see, and this is where we have to, you know, and I love, you know, when we think about communion and we think about, you know, the Last Supper, we think about, you know, the significance of that, you know, is that we have to see first that this table that we're called to come to sup with Jesus, right? Because, you know, he says he's going to come to us. You know, if he stands at the door and he knocks, and he's constantly doing that, right? And he says, if, you know, and any man who opens, in other words, if we are obedient, we are open to him, that he will come in and he will sup with us. See, and that communion table really is a table of calling Christ in.
Yeah, like an
into
open
our
invitation.
relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. We open the door.
Come, y'all.
Yeah. We come and then he comes and he is gracious with his presence. And then but he calls us, one, to be first uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because there is an uncomfortableness that comes with us, right? Well, we know that, you know, even when we have company coming, right? What do we do? What do we do?
We still clean up.
Yeah, we rush
Did
around.
You put that
and
away?
we put,
Is that away? And where is that if we need this? Go
Yeah.
check in the bathroom. Where is that toilet paper?
Yeah,
Everything.
and making sure everything
Yes.
is clean. And, you know, we try to, you know, and, you know, it's the same way. I think we come to the table, you know, with Christ. We come with, we have to look in, you know, all the spaces of our hearts. Are we clean? Do we have unhealthy things in our lives? Do we have, you know, some sin in our lives that, you know, that we've been kind of stuffing in the corner, you know? We've been kind of hiding away, you know, resentment, some bad habits or something, you know. Is there something that we've been just kind of hiding in the back room, so to speak, you know? And so this is where, you know, we have to come to the table, look at that, but then we also have to remember that he calls us to this open table.
Yeah.
The open table is, he tells us to come because even if we have, and that's the I guess for us the most difficult thing to let go of, or to come to awareness of, is he comes to be the one to cleanse us. And that was interesting, you know, at that Last Supper, where Jesus listened to all remember the story about how the disciples got into an argument over who was the greatest, right?
Yes.
You know, and they were squabbling, you know, kind of on their side by themselves.
Just like in a family.
Right.
I can just hear our grandkids. I'm sure we didn't do it.
Yeah.
But he did this, but I did that for him, and whatever. Doesn't that count?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, sometimes we don't know.
And Jesus, instead of screaming and yelling and telling them like we would, right? Shut up, you know. You know, he just gets up and he changes, you know, out of his robe and he puts on a towel and he washes their feet.
Yes.
He gets up and he shows them, he demonstrates. Right. He demonstrates
to us.
And he constantly does this.
Yeah, he ministers to us first.
Yeah.
Before we trying to minister to him.
Right. Because we can't.
So gracious.
Right?
Gracious. Yeah.
Graciousness. And see, this is the example, I think, that we as husbands and wives need to first to understand and then to follow.
Yeah.
You know, is that we need to minister as servants to one another. We need to minister out of graciousness and love to one another, even when we least deserve it. When our spouse may seem to least deserve it, this is where our grace must more abound, even as Christ's grace and love more abounds when we least deserve it.
Well, we see that also with the kids. You know, sometimes we say, oh gosh, I had it with them or whatever. But yet, come evening and it's bedtime, you want to tuck them in, you want to pray with them, you want to show them love, you want to show them grace. And it's say, Mommy, I love you, you know, and you're melting.
Yeah.
And we're just thinking, how much does God has to love us? How much, I shouldn't say has to love us. He just loves us.
Yeah, he just loves us.
He just loves us, whether we deserve it or not, or whether we ask and plead for it or not.
Yeah.
He just loves us. It's open grace. It's amazing. It's amazing. Amazing grace.
Amazing grace. Just
I
like
didn't
the
even
song.
hear that song this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing, and yet it's also humbling. You know, it's humbling because we know that we don't deserve it.
Yeah.
We understand, you know, that, you know, we know what we've done. You know, even the little kids understand when they've done something wrong.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Then they come, Mommy, but I love you.
Yeah, so I remember our son used to say, Mommy, I love you. And he would bring him just before we found out whatever he messed up in the back. You know, and you know, and you know, it's that kind of open grace that we need to demonstrate and we need to exercise with one another. You know, I love this quote out of Colossians 3:13, where, you know, Paul is writing to the church in Colossae, and they were having a lot of problems, relationships wise. There were a lot of conflicts there, but he said, bear with each other and forgive one another if any has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you.
Mm-hmm.
And as husband, as we would do well to take that to heart and bring it home, literally bring it home, and practice that. How has Jesus forgiven us?
Mm-hmm.
How has he shown that grace to us? And this is, if anything we can take out of this Easter season that we've just come through, and apply it to our marriages, apply it to our relationships in general, is to forgive as Christ has forgiven us.
Yep.
And because this has so much implications, not only now, but for eternity. In our, what God is calling us to as his children.
Mm-hmm.
And that his grace will be sufficient for us. Even though we feel like somehow we come up on the short end of things, somehow there's an unfairness. But you know what? Christ didn't talk about fairness.
Yes.
There was no fairness. The cross was the most
unfair thing. Yeah.
Because
That's amazing.
Right. Here he was sinless, and he had never done any wrong, never committed any sin, but he became sin for us.
Mm-hmm.
Most.
I'm just thinking at a seminar we were one time, and one of the wives got up and said it was a very special time for me because my husband said that for the first time in all those years that I'm sorry. And of course he said, come on, I say I'm sorry all the time, but it's also a way
the
how
way
we say
it, right.
I'm sorry, but,
right.
I'm sorry, but you did this and this too. And I'm just thinking back at that moment when I heard that I don't know how long they were married, 10, 15 years at least. And that they said that's the first time that he ever said, I'm sorry. And then, of course, she added, but I'm saying I'm sorry all the time. And, she had to say that somehow. And I thought, oh, poor guy. Here he said, I'm sorry, but in front of us, too, all the people. And then I thought, yeah, that's how we are sometimes. We justify it.
Mm-hmm.
On one side, we say sorry. On the other side, we justify what we did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's there we need a lot of grace to overcome that part.
That's
or
right.
to have our spouse
Mm-hmm.
forgiving us,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to learn that, to ask for forgiveness, whether it's to our spouse or the children or someone else, in true meaning
In
of the word
sincerity.
sincerity.
Yeah.
I am sorry I did that. For the kids we say, I'm sorry for what? What? I'm sorry that I was not nice to you. No, be more specific. We already teach that to the kids. But we adults sometimes have a hard time to do it ourselves.
Oh yeah. It's the hardest
And
thing. Right?
I guess, like in the church, this Good Friday, we were saying, you write it down, what you
Your
are
sin,
sorry
yeah.
for your sin. And so, and it's amazing that sometimes we sit there with our paper, in this case, and say, what should I write down? Well, there's a lot of things I could but what is it really what I need to write down? You know, we sometimes not even honest with ourselves. And we have to learn to be honest with our spouse. And definitely honest with God, because God knows everything from the beginning. And He is definitely loving and forgiving and graceful. And so it was really an experience also this Good Friday, you know, to see that we going to church every week or whatever, but we still, most of us or most of the people from church went up to dump that little paper in front of a cross, knowing it will be forgiven. And that's what we have to learn as husband and wife, to forgive each other and not the next day say, yeah, but you know, yesterday, hello, we have forgiven. So let's have it forgiven. Let's have grace which abounds, how you say that? Abounds more than 2 hours or 24 hours.
Yeah.
Let's do it like the Lord did. Once He forgave us, we don't even have to come back and ask for forgiveness again, unless we did it again. But otherwise, we can know that He forgave our sins. And you forgave me, and I forgive you. So I'm just so grateful for that.
And the thing is this, a lot of times, and you know, we're afraid to forgive, or we're afraid to let go of, say, our hurt or our anger, especially because we don't understand how freeing it really is to let go of that. Not only for the person who's wronged us, but it is actually freeing for us. You know, and we are not, we are not actually made to hold on to that kind of negativity, if you will. It's not healthy for us. And so we have to remember, if we let go of that, it is better for us, and it helps us to build. We learn to forgive as we forgive. Okay, so God bless you, and
God bless you.
we hope that you really can take this to heart, the message of Easter, the message of grace. Yes, and apply it, because it will bring healing and hope and growth into your relationship.
Family and relationship. God
God
bless
bless
you.